from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. I don't hold any other really special title. I've taught for about 13 years across the different sectors, as in independent, private, and also government schools here in Australia. I currently work at Press Hill, the Margaret Little Memorial School in Melbourne. I'm very passionate in my teaching about pastoral care and purposeful, accessible and relevant teaching, and trying to show that in my classes. A couple of random facts. I have lived in Mexico. It was a fantastic time in my life. And on my own, I enjoy spending time with my family. I have a little daughter, swimming, salsa dancing, and catching up with friends and walking my dog. That's what I like to do in my spare time. So today, how I thought I'd structure today is something more that I would have loved when I was beginning to teach in the MYP, and basically hold your hand in creating a unit. So I'm going to show you the process that I went through in creating this unit that I'm particularly fond of, and and the children seem to love it as well. It's an ethics in sport unit. It runs for approximately 10 weeks. And we do it with our year 8s here. So they're about 13, 14 years old here. This is some of the process that I want to take you through today. So how I start with my big idea, what do I want my unit to address with the kids? How do I come up with a key concept? How do you then come up with related concepts? Adding your global context, and then of course with all of that in mind, how do you create a meaningful state of inquiry? And of course from there we can then build our unit. I've called my session the matter, the meaning and the mode, because it's catchy, but also it's the things that I kind of address in my units to make sure that they are meaningful and student-centered for my students. So first of all, I guess I kind of look at 3 things. I'm sure you do too in your teaching. One thing we really like to address at my school is what our students are into. What are they passionate about? So feel free to pop those into the chat. Some things that you have come up maybe that you'd love to build a unit around. I'd love to see ideas. I might take some for myself too, but what do your students, what are they into? What would they like to have in a really well-rounded PHE curriculum? Of course, don't forget, we have to obviously look at what you must be teaching. So what are you governed to teach? And then of course, also look at your faculty strengths, either at your teachers. So in particular, I'm having a lot of knowledge on swimming, for example. So I have added a swimming unit to our program, but maybe your school's particularly strong at volleyball. You have a teacher that's quite inept at that. Just sort of have a look at some of what we experiment with new sports. I love that. We recently did a unit on global sports, so sports from all around the world. Anything else that people's students are particularly passionate about, some issues, or because I find it quite hard sometimes to incorporate the health side into our physical education program. Not sure if I...
Yeah, Beth, we have Ahmad who says protection and safety, gender equality.
Social media, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Drugs and sports. We don't do a unit on that, but that would be particularly fun. Yep.
Emily says competition and fun. Siddhi says stock market.
Stock market, yeah. Gender identity, yeah. I do think that, and that we kind of actually address this in this unit. Perspectives.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Shanta says health and nutrition.
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
I'll move along. So I'll start creating my unit with you. So what I kind of looked at initially was the ethics in sport. So I'd love, again, your input in here, but in my big idea, I looked at what is ethics in sport? What kind of things could I actually cover? So I, in particular, looked at, I thought, access to opportunities that can differ depending on availability. Because I'm in Australia, the culture of sport in Australia, we pride ourselves in Australia on being very good at sport on the global stage, in particular in some sports. So where does that come from? How does that fit into our society? We might want to look at gender in sport or in the media. How are women versus men portrayed in the media as athletes? Equality in sport, and that's a huge banner that we look at. Disability, of course, gender, age, access. So that's a fantastic one. And sports and athletes, how they can highlight cultural issues, either positively or negatively in the media, and be, I guess, role models maybe for the students. So I wanted to encompass all of this in my ethics in sport unit. So that was my starting point. I started with my meaning, with my big idea. So from here, I start to build my unit. So in HPE, or PHE, sorry, we have 4 key concepts, and they are relationships, communication, change, and development's a more recent one, which is fantastic. I'm so glad they added it. I suggest too, mapping. If you map your whole curriculum, you might find you hit some of these more than others. Just something to note. So when I looked at each of these, how could I link these back to my bigger idea? And looking at each of these. So relationships, pretty easy to link. How do people connect and interrelate with each other, and maybe treat each other fairly and things like that? So relationships in ethics in sport. Communication, maybe I could look at the media in that. Change, we're seeing a lot of change and talk in the media and changing of perspectives and opportunities and things. So that one might fit really well. And development is more skill related, but this might be more relating skills on how the students could voice their perspective, or their belief in the ethics in sport. So I looked at each of those, and I guess eventually I didn't highlight it, sorry about that, but I looked at relationships and change. To be honest with you, I couldn't decide between these two. I felt very passionately about both of them. Of note, I guess I work in a very small department in my school. There used to be 2 of us. We do have a couple more now. So we're often creating units on our own. So it can be done. I'd love to know which ones, or maybe you just pause and reflect on which ones you might choose, and why you feel comfortable. It's important to know why you feel comfortable on those. Kripa, did you have?
Yeah, we're waiting for people to, put something on the chat.
Yeah. Child protection issues, that's a very, looking at that.
Communication, maybe. Relationship is best fit, says Mohammed.
Yeah.
Change, because
Sorry, yeah. Relationship is always, I find that one's very easy to fit in almost every unit. So I love to think of other ones. Change, I saw that one because
we want to bring in the change.
Yeah. Yes.
Martin says, I'd say it really depends from the perspective that you're teaching from on. on which like key concept related concepts are most used.
Yes, definitely. And that's
And
why I encourage people to keep relating back to their big idea. So you have to really centralize that bigger idea to make sure that it keeps fitting. I'm going to keep moving on. So next we look at our related concepts, and we have a few to choose from. Again, I can go through each. I'm not going to go through each of these and how they could fit, but eventually we got down to environment and perspectives. Perspectives, I think, does fit pretty easily. We threw around, I remember, balance and choice with these. But again, we came down to these because of other units. We do hit balance a lot. We hit choice a lot. So we wanted to possibly hit maybe environment. So that was part of our overall mapping. Sorry, I don't know why it's not moving. So I wanted to kind of recap here. I've got my bigger idea, which is what I need to keep coming back to. I broke it down to 2 key concepts because I couldn't necessarily decide. And I saw someone said change might be the most challenging, and maybe it is. And I chose perspectives and environment. So where to next to create my statement of inquiry? We have to look at the global context. So this is the really why this matters, why this unit for that each individual student, why does this count? I teach maths also and get that notorious question of when am I going to use this in my life? This is what you can come back to and go, well, this is the time when you might use it. So I personally feel that global context is very important to get right. Eventually, I looked at this. So this is, like I said, why it matters. It's the context for your teaching and learning of your unit. And to develop additional context that helps students relate and find the meaning, as I mentioned. I felt when I looked at the definitions for each, you don't have to look at the whole definition overall, but pick that one line within it that you go, yep, that's going back to my bigger idea. It's not necessarily what fits in well with a sentence. You need to go back to your bigger idea. And so in fairness and development, I found access to equal opportunities. And I just went back to my big idea and found that, did it look at disability? Yes. Does it look at gender? Yes. Equal pay for athletes? Yes. Can we look at all of these issues in ethics in sport through this? And yes, we can. So coming back to my bigger idea. So now I've got all of those, I can start to create my statement of inquiry. This is probably my take-home message. It was my light bulb moment when I was initially starting out in the MYP, and structuring it this way really helped me. And it was putting that students will understand that ... I initially chose relationships, so that's my key concept is in red and my related concepts are in blue. Through an inquiry into, and then you add your global context. So if you need to write that one down, I highly recommend it. And you can put these in any order, of course. You can chop and change all of these. So initially I went, students will understand that relationships are affected by perspectives and the environment through an inquiry into access to equal opportunities. So how might that break down? Relationships can be influenced by the perspective and environment when having access to equal opportunities. Didn't sit really well with me. I wanted to look at more at change, because that's going back to my bigger idea, what the students felt passionately about. So going back to that, I changed the key concept and changed it. So perspectives can change the environment through an inquiry into access to equal opportunity. So you can see here I've changed as well. I've put a related concept, a key concept, and then followed by another related concept, and then my global context. So eventually I came up with a very short, sweet, perspectives can change in an environment consisting of equal opportunities. That was my statement of inquiry. I felt happy about that. I have heard this, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically a great statement of inquiry can also be applied in other contexts, in other subjects. That ensures that it is meaningful to the students and that they can, it allows for that inquiry-based learning as well. So I've got my statement of inquiry. Here we go. The rest of the unit. So you might have seen these. I found this very easy to talk about with the inquiry questions. So you have to, when developing a unit, you need to implement these. You could survey the students or they could come up with the questions themselves. That would ensure that it's very student-centered. Factual questions are basically the what, who, when, and how of your unit. So in this instance, in ethics in sport, it could be the who has a greater number of hours televised on free-to-air TV, males or females? When do they televise? At what time do they televise male versus female sport? What is the prize money difference in tennis? Sorry, I know I'm using gendered examples. They're just the ones that have come to my head. How do people have access? How do people with a disability gain access to facilities to participate in the sport? Conceptual questions are a little more abstract. They're the exploration of that bigger idea. So it might be how's something evolved over time. It might be more who's taking action on this kind of thing. So bit more, again, a bit more abstract. And then you've got, sorry, apologies, I don't know where that went, how that happened. You're just seeing all the rest of mine. There we go. Debatable questions are more your controversial questions. So this one really gets the students fired up. And again, coming back, it really makes it more student-centered. Controversials are, like I said, debatable. So it'd be great if you could just take a minute and think, maybe in a unit that you have, that you're building, that you're even just contemplating, what could you add in each of those? And if it's more of a practical unit, the conceptual and debatable questions still need to be in there. I'll come to my next question. So like I said, take a moment just to think of examples for each of these. What I'd like to talk about next is choosing the mode of your delivery. So you have got your big idea, you've got your statement of inquiry, and started to think about the direction your unit will go. Then is when you choose the mode. I have seen teachers in the past choose this first. I really want to do a volleyball unit. How can I then fit all this statement of inquiry and bigger idea into that? It's much harder to do that. The mode should be the vehicle of what you deliver your bigger idea by. So don't choose this first. It'll diminish the meaningfulness of your units. If you're wondering what this sport is, if you've come from somewhere else, it is Australian football. It's AFL, affectionately. It's very big in the southern parts of Australia. But for an ethics unit, I am sure NFL, basketball, tennis, beach volleyball is a great one because of a lot of differences in gender there. Basketball's excellent too because you can look at a lot of the Paralympics or access to opportunities, maybe sponsorships and those kind of things. So in an ethics and sport unit, I did choose AFL because these people, it is huge in the media. So there's a lot of resources. I needed a sport that provided a lot of these resources and provoked those discussions within the students. Having said this, I might not have chosen this sport if I lived somewhere else in Australia. I used to live in Queensland and I might have chosen rugby because it's much bigger. I wanted to talk quickly about ATLs. First of all, how lucky are we in PHE? I feel like in staff meetings and things when they talk about these and saying you have to hit these, make sure you're doing these, I can go, yep, communication, social thinking, research, I can hit all of those. I could find an example explicitly to teach these. So I feel like we are really lucky. I'd love to see actually at this time, can you share some examples of how you explicitly teach these in your classroom? It's something I love to have fresh on, and in this community would be great if I could see. So how do you explicitly teach ATLs in your units?
Maybe you can just drop in, okay, through class activities, self-management, mindset during games, performances.
Beautiful.
Reflection given with the help of ATLs, case studies, giving time limitations.
Oh, that's probably for, self-management. Yep.
Team building and social interaction.
Formative assessment, yeah. Peer coaching, I love that. I think that's a really valuable one, having peer coaching. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Rohit says he asks his students what would fit with the unit.
That's a great idea. So having these displayed it's really, for us, we're an outdoor basketball court and we could actually improve on having these displayed. Working in team games, yes, definitely. Great.
Group discussions by keeping it authentic, including research.
Yeah, research and assessment. Yep. I think someone mentioned reflection. So journals are great, and we, obviously differentiation we can easily use for journals. Role play, great. We have done a unit, a sport education model, where we actually give each of the students, some of them a coach, a team manager, a team captain, players, and you can actually set up a whole season around this. So you can really hit a lot of the ATLs in that.
Davina says, giving a scenario and let students analyze the ethical side of it.
Great. That's really great.
Akib says video analysis.
Yeah, so it's really important though, I guess, that we are explicit with our ATLs. It's not just something that we put on the top of our assessment. It's something you keep referring to. And like I said, if you can have these on display, it's a good thing. So the ATLs in this particular unit that I hit, and it is, we had a lot of people mention through assessment, critical thinking is huge in this because we do discuss a lot of important issues that have to be spoken about. And the research part is assessment, which I'll get to, but we talk about media literacy and information literacy. So look, you might come back to the ATLs after this, at the end of the unit, after you've created your assessment and so on. And that's absolutely fine if you're going in order, in a particular order. So when you are creating assessment, it's important that you identify the subject group objectives and strands. And I'm not going to go into these in a lot of detail today. Just of note, if you didn't know, you do need to assess all strands twice a year. In this particular unit, we look at B and D, all strands. Outline the type of task and its parameters. So what I chose to do for this one was a persuasive essay. And again, coming back, this is why I chose the mode of delivery before the assessment task. So it made this much clearer of what I wanted to do. Your assessment task needs to also relate back to your statement of inquiry very, very clearly. So if I'm looking at equal opportunities and changes and perspectives, how does my persuasive essay guide students towards that? So it needs to ensure that there's authenticity and meaningfulness. Your assessment creates that opportunity for that students to show that. And bring it all together in that culminative take-home message. This is an example of an assessment we've done for this unit in the past. So it was looking at, we did open it up a little bit more than just the sport, but we looked at, they could pick a topic within that has controversial issues within sport and looked at minority groups, possibly racism, even religion, hypermasculinity, drugs in sport, cheating, technology, possibly gambling advertisements. That's something that's been a huge thing here in Australia. And then they had to create their persuasive essay around that. We did offer for differentiation, just to note, it wasn't necessarily had to be through, here it is over here, a persuasive essay. They could have chosen a magazine article, could have done, a podcast or radio show, or done, like a news segment. We have a show here in Australia called The Project. So choosing one of those topics. You could relate it more to your particular sport that you chose. We opened it up a little bit here. There's more to this, with reference lists and we scaffolded it more, but I'm not going to include those today. Planning and the next step, especially if you go and use the Toddle app for this, it's all outlined for you. But planning and documenting your learning experiences, we use Manage Back within our school. At this time, what I'm going to ask that you do, I hope it might be in the chat, is the link for a Padlet, is to post your ideas within this unit in particular. What ideas could you have? So this is the Padlet here. So if you can go to that link that will be shared with you. I've added a couple already of some sample learning experiences. So this is stuff that you can document when you're writing your unit, and it might be something you do as you go, and that's totally fine. But having a central place where this happens is super important. It's not something you keep a file by yourself. You have this somewhere where it can be accessed for future teachers. So if you can add to the Padlet, that would be fantastic on ideas and learning experiences that you could do for this unit would be great. And I just saw a question, was this unit entirely theory? So no, as I explained in this, what we did a lot of was we learnt AFL, the skills of Australian football. However, within those sessions, sometimes I would create an environment, in particular this one, that gives a bias to a group. So it might be that they got a different type of feedback. They didn't get the same equipment as others. It might be, so different scenarios. And I'd love to see more scenario ideas that you could highlight something that could provoke those, especially those controversial or debatable discussions within your classroom. So having access to equipment could be one. Use of good quality equipment versus broken equipment. I love that one. That's fantastic idea. Well, hopefully we don't have to break equipment to do it, but it might be, I can see where that's going. It's that use of equal opportunity, access to equal opportunities. So I can see some great ideas coming up here. Rules and interpretation of rules. Tamaya, thank you. So you could add different, I guess, rules to your scenarios as well. I've said also you could analyze TV guides. You could, I've been in a school previously where we hired a set of wheelchairs and played wheelchair basketball. You could have a guest speaker come in as well. Training using technology versus no technology. Excellent. And what that might give you and the opportunities. Nike commercial analytical task or other sports related ads. Excellent. This could be IDU with ELL. Effect of performance enhancing drugs on athletes' careers. That could be a theory component. Yeah. And this is a great unit too. If you are still teaching online, we're back to face here in Australia. But if you are online, this is a great unit too that you could do online. It would be really easy to adapt to that. Create a student journal to record their development or their reflections, I imagine, yeah. Excellent. Different grounds for each gender, another great one. So you could split kids by gender, looking at equal pay for athletes. So I know, for example, the Australian Open, still different prize money. You could set up class debates on these. This is fantastic. You guys are amazing. I'm definitely going to keep these. Playing surface, yes, looking at playing surface. Role of audience in sport. Honey, I've not thought of that, and that's really interesting. Because especially now, because a lot of stadiums don't have audiences. So that would be really interesting to research or look into, and looking at sport culture and things. Choose a political activist who is an athlete. Yes, I love that. Host a debate on the issue. Thank you so much, guys. This is absolutely, you guys are an amazing group of people. Please keep adding to this. You all have access to it. I'm going to head back just to wind up a little here. So thank you for posting your ideas. They were amazing. As someone mentioned actually in the chat, these can be in the classroom or practical. Your learning experiences will of course be dictated by your student ability and year level. So I mentioned a few times about differentiation, and that might be, we have a wide range in our school, so it's something that we're always looking at and refining, and it is a working document. You always hear those words thrown around, but it is an evolving thing. You can always keep adding to this. Of course, access to resources. Again, we're a small school, so we don't have the same access that some of our elite Melbourne schools have access to. I'm stuck, for example, with a stopwatch as opposed to timing gates that students can run through. So that might dictate, of course, your experiences. Governing curriculum bodies. So what do you actually have to be teaching might affect your learning experiences. And again, the modal vehicle of delivery that you chose might affect what you document here too. At this point, I'm actually going to hand over to Kripa to take you through a little bit more about the Toddle app and planning online.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So Toddle platform is going to help you make unit planning all the more simpler. And as Beth suggested, the inquiry questions are pathways to learning for our students, right? So on the platform, for each learning experience, not only can you tag learning goals, but you're also able to tag all possible inquiry questions that can be investigated in a given week. So this way, you know which inquiry question is being covered during the course of the unit, which is going to help you plan better and also ensure that you have covered everything you started out to achieve with the kids. We can move on to the next one, Beth. Yeah, another great feature that we have, which ties in really well with what Beth was sharing about assessments, is that the planner also supports you to predict or anticipate what students should be demonstrating, and to also add task-specific clarifications for each assessment. With this, you can see how you're addressing the assessments transformatively or in your summatives, and adding necessary clarifications to students to help them succeed. Yeah, so if you want to, dive a little deeper into Toddle's MYP planner, you can book a free demo. You have a link on the chat. All right. So if you have any questions, guys, you can always put it up on the Q&A as well as on the chat box. But I'm going to take you through a few questions now. Beth, Mihai has asked, have you ever been inspired about a great idea that you shaped into a statement of inquiry and then built the unit around it from your experience?
That's exactly how I came up with this unit. So I used to teach some time ago, like I said, and I analysed the time on TV that was given to female sports versus male sports, and it was just such a significant difference. And having these conversations as well, especially with senior students coming up with those. And so that is actually how this unit has come to fruition. We do have a couple of others in our school as well. We have like a life-saving one. In Australia, there's a report that comes out every year of drowning rates. So when looking at that as like a risk management unit, and then teaching life-saving skills. And so it's a practical unit in that sense. So absolutely, I think that is actually the place to start, is the big idea, and then you build the unit from that.
All right, thanks, Beth. So we have Simon who's asked, PHE is a practical subject, and how do you strike the balance between discussions on the statements of inquiry, etc., with the students, while also staying true to the nature of the subject?
Yeah, well, it's important to remember, I guess, it is physical and health education, and it does actually say that in the principles booklet that we are required to teach some health components, and that's why they have also, the development side of it, you can relate the skills to that, and how we structure that balance is ensuring that we have all the hours covered for practical, but then set aside time for the theory. And I mean, look, essentially those discussions are for the students' learning anyway. Even if half of your class, you are in a classroom and having a discussion and talking to a guest speaker, or isn't that still learning and skill building? So, you know, I don't feel guilty about not having the students running around at that point. That there's still inspired learning happening. I hope that answers the question. Again, I'm not an expert on all of this. I'm just a regular teacher. Yeah.
So Kushagra has asked, how do we balance between the conceptual connections in IB with skills and techniques with a sport or an activity?
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
How do we balance between the conceptual connections in IB with skills and techniques with a sport or an activity?
I guess still relating it back to your statement of inquiry. So if you've formed a strong statement of inquiry, that technically should be an easy thing to do. And having that still as the forefront of each lesson and through your learning experiences, relating back to your bigger idea in your statement of inquiry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jay has asked, do you think it's appropriate to use other key concepts outside of PHE if you hit those often?
I've never heard of that. I don't know to be honest, I don't know the correct answer to that question. There is a lot there. I mean, I think there's, what is there, 12 or so? So with the related concepts, otherwise the key concepts you need to use those ones, I believe. I'd love to be corrected, but that's what I believe.
Okay, so Kushagra has popped in another question. So the big idea coming from a space wherein the kids feel more passionate about when inculcating the ethical perspectives and connections. Sometimes during delivering the unit, the kids sometimes fade out because then the highlights shift from what they like to making the unit transferable. Do you have any insights for this, Beth?
So making the unit transferable to,
Yeah.
Well, I guess again, if you can keep relating it back to not necessarily a whole global context, but then filtering down to their personal lives, you know, use a personal example that a 13-year-old can relate to. It doesn't have to be necessarily a global issue, just in your community, what do you have access to, or for this unit in particular? Or it might be, have you ever experienced, can you find a solution? So really making it, like I said, not necessarily an overall arching banner, but maybe how does it become really individually student-centered?
So we have Ahmad Chaudhary, who's asked, what are some of the ways in which you identify what ATLs go with the statement of inquiry?
As I mentioned, it might be after you've mapped. It could be if you've mapped your whole and you've done your whole scope and sequence, you might put your ATLs in at that point. It might be once you've done your assessment, you can also reflect on your ATLs at that point as well. Or once you've chosen your mode of delivery, you can reflect on which ATLs you'd like to hit. Again, mapping ATLs is not just, it shouldn't just be subject. It could be a whole school exercise as well. I highly recommend if your school's never done that, it's a great activity to do, because you might find, you know, that maths or science are hitting particular ones a lot, like research, but then you're hitting communication and social skills all the time. So how can you filter those across those subjects, for example?
Yeah. So how do you manage time between the discussion and practicals in PHE with the limited set of sessions time? Elizabeth has also asked what percentage of your lessons are in the classroom?
Yeah, at the moment we run, it probably actually works out almost 70-30, 70% practical, 30 in the classroom. It can be dependent on weather sometimes too. It's not going to be, I can't put for every single unit, it's going to depend on the nature of the unit. So for example, the swimming unit, it's almost 100% practical and maybe a few discussions here and there. And, you know, at the end of the lane, we have a talk about something, and then we might have one lesson where we look at the drowning report, but mostly it's practical and how do we save someone's life in the water. But then this kind of unit might be more discussion based. But using those practical experiences are, of course, very important. We have other skills, you know, developing team skills and communication skills in our lower year levels. And again, that's almost a wholly practical unit where we have them do reflection journals at home. So I'm sorry, it's not a black and white answer. It can be dependent on the nature of the unit. And I think it's important for us to be flexible in that way.
Okay, I think that's about it. But yeah, we have probably one last question. What are some resources for teachers for PHE planning?
Oh, I've just, to be honest with you, I've just discovered the Toddle app, and it is super, super simple. I'm not just drumming. I'm not getting paid for this. Mm-hmm. They do it really well. It's very simple to follow. Jump on, if you're not in Facebook groups, please jump on those. People share amazing things. They'll share ready-made units with you that really help with your teaching. If your school uses Manage Back, just keep, and you don't like it, just keep playing with it to get a hang of it. So they're the ones in my experiences that I've had with planning, and of course using colleagues. Less experienced, more experienced, it doesn't matter. Same subject, it doesn't matter. Use your colleagues too. I mean, that's kind of what is fantastic about the IB, is it's so collaborative.
Great. So I think that's about it. We don't seem to have a lot of questions now, but I see a lot of people thanking you, Beth. That was really interactive and engaging.
It's my first time, everybody, by the way. I'm going to say it now. It was my first one. So thank you for experiencing that with me. I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah, we really hope, I'm sure everybody is gain insights on how to create their units. All right, we have a lot of people thanking you right now. That's about it. We're going to wrap this session here. Thank you so much, Beth, for giving us such insights. We have our next session, which is the MYP Unit Planner, More Than a Portfolio of Teaching and Learning by Rafael, which is at 11:30 a.m. GMT. So that's about it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in. Yeah, thank you, Chetna.
Thank you. I can see I'm very humbled by everyone's thanks. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks so much, Beth.